Good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Schweich, State Auditor. Thank you for coming here tonight for the discussion of the delivery of the audit of the Asheville School District. A nice ride in here. I really enjoyed looking around the town before I came here. It's the first time I've been to a gas station in a long time where I'll let you pump the gas without paying first. So it's like a nice community. People trust each other. So I very much appreciate that. I'm here with our media director, Spence Jackson's here. If anybody in media is here, we can set up interviews afterwards. And also there's Pam Tillery, a CPA and our audit manager, who did a lot of the work here, and Natalie McNish. Where are you, Natalie? There, she's out there in audits. We have a really good group here. What I'm going to do tonight, when I come to a community to talk about the results of an audit, what I do is I go through the audits and the recommendations, and then I answer the questions anybody might have, and we have other people here to answer questions if I can. I want to talk a little bit about how I got here. This is a petition audit. You all asked me to come here. We can audit school districts with or without a petition, but in my view, as your state auditor, when somebody takes the time to petition me to do something, we always put that at the top of the heap. We make it a top priority because you as citizens took the time to ask us to do something, and that's really democracy in action. We think it's very important when people petition us that we do a very thorough and quick job, and then I personally come here to deliver the results. I frequently do not deliver the results of audits in person. We just kind of send them out and you all can look at it. But you all took the time to ask me to come to you, and so I'm taking the time to come to you and deliver the results. In order for us to do the petition audit, we needed 400 signatures. We got 406, so it's a valid petition audit. That's 15% of the 2,663 people who voted in the last governor's election. That's what was required under state law, and you met those requirements. We began the field work in March 2013, completed in August. We did our exit interview where we talked to the members of the board about what we found in March. We spent 1,294 hours on the audit. That's a little more than we actually expected. And the reason is simple. And as we go through it, you'll see. We found a whole lot of small problems in the district, a couple of bigger ones. But often when I do audits, and this is like a 50-page audit, an audit of school district this size, sometimes they're just 10 or 12 pages. And the length of the audit doesn't really mean whether it's good or bad, but it does reflect how many things we found. And it was a very complex audit. There were a lot of findings which I'll go over. We audited the year June 30th, ending June 30, 2013, but if we found something that went into this year, we mentioned it, and if we found significant issues that went back further years, we also discussed those in the audit. But basically, we tend to focus on one particular year when we do an audit. That's the way we always do school districts, and we might go a little bit forward and a little bit backwards. We did not find any evidence of theft or criminal misconduct, which is good, but we did find a lot of problems with the accounting and accounting controls that could lead somebody to engage in misconduct. When I became auditor, I put a grading system together. Everybody we audit gets actually a good, a fair report. We give the Ash Grove School District a fair, which means that there are significant problems that require immediate attention. And the good news was that I felt that the school district and the school board were amenable to making the changes that we recommended. There are a lot of findings in this audit. It's more than we usually find. But as I said, there was no one major. I've been places where people are stealing money. I've been places where $30 or $40 million of construction contracts all went to the same company. We didn't find anything like that here, but it'll take me a little while to get through it tonight because there were so many smaller and medium-sized issues we found. Basically, if I could summarize the results of this audit, is before we got here, the accounting controls were very loose. There was not a lot of attention paid to detail, and there were several state laws that were not being complied with. The good news is, and I'll go over this as I go through them, the board recognizes the problems here, and they are willing to make the commitments and correct them. Many of the issues that we found have actually already been corrected, and that's good news, and we're pleased about that. Let me talk about the specific findings. You all have the audit in front of you. Finding is, by definition, a problem. It's something that needs to be corrected. We don't have good findings. They're only findings of things that need to be corrected. If you look in your audit report, finding number 1 relates to accounting controls over cash receipts and change funds. We found several problems in this area. First of all, there was not a segregation of duties. Generally, when you do accounting, you don't have one person doing everything because that gives them an opportunity to engage in mischief. In this particular case, the duties of receiving, recording, depositing, and transmitting monies and supervisory reviews were not present. We found that the school board did not establish written policies to address the types of records to be maintained and the accounting procedures that employees should follow when they collect money. Everybody should know exactly what's expected of them when they collect money and how they will handle it. The school board did not establish those types of situations. The school administration staff did not issue receipts for monies collected from students, parents, teachers, and the district bookkeeper and the secretary of the board did not issue receipt slips for some monies collected in the administrative office. It's accounting 101 that somebody gives you money, you give them a receipt, and those types of procedures need significant improvement, was the first finding. The receipt slips that were given out did not always indicate the composition of the receipts. When you give out a receipt, you should say it's a cash, a check, a money order, whatever that standard procedure. That was not going on. They were not always transmitted or deposited timely into the bank. It's kind of another basic rule of accounting. You don't hold on to money. When you've got money, you deposit in the bank. And there were some problems with that. We also found that teachers sometimes use district receipts to pay event expenses rather than transmitting them to the bank, which is also not appropriate. For example, we found $446 for caps and gowns was paid directly to a vendor without any documentation of the transmittal. We found the district does not maintain or reconcile concession inventory records to concession monies collected. So when concessions are sold at athletic events, I know you have some great teams here in Ash Grove, there should be very clear indication of the inventory that you have, what was sold, and then you can reconcile the amount of money is consistent with the amount of goods that were sold and nobody had sold the money. And that was not being done in this particular case. We also found that money was not often maintained in a secure location. It's not as bad as what we found in Springfield when they were storing money in a freezer, but we did find some pretty serious problems. We found $460 in cash and $96 in checks that were in classrooms, unlocked desks and file cabinets, and over $3,000 in a closet in an office that every employee had access to. You just don't leave $3,000 lying around. Elementary teachers did not use a consistent form for recording student meals, and the elementary secretary did maintain a complete and accurate daily collection log for those meals. There are also change funds. Schools almost always have change funds for small amounts of cash. Each school we found maintains a change fund for vending machines and the like, but there was no list of approved change funds or authorized balances. Some were not maintained at a constant amount, and the district did not maintain adequate documentation of the change funds for sporting events or student activities. We identified 12 change funds and totaling over $2,000, none of which were reflected in the school's records at all. And that needs to be changed. So our recommendations, every time we have a finding, we make recommendations, and we ask the school if they're going to do it. In this case, we recommended that segregation of accounting duties occur to the extent possible, and they've implemented that. There is now complete segregation duty and a supervisory review. That written policies for the collection of district monies be established. The district has implemented that. They now have written policies for those things. That monies be maintained in a secure location. That's very important. The district has implemented that. That there are adequate controls and procedures to account for meal collections. And the district has now moved to a computerized system. So no money is actually, as you know, transacted in the cafeteria, which we consider to be a significant improvement, which reduces the chance of mischief. We also wanted written procedures for change funds, a list of all change funds, and reconciliation of change funds to authorized balances, and that has also been implemented. So the first finding we had basically deals with how to handle relatively small amounts of cash. It was very loose. We identified several corrections that need to be made, and I think the good news is the district has already implemented the recommendations that we made. We want to talk a little bit about finding number 2 now in your audit, which is district compensation. We found the district needs to improve its documentation and reporting for employment contracts, additional compensation, and step-ladder compensation for when teachers or other members of the staff do additional work. We found that the school board does not review or approve non-tenured administrative employees' employment contracts. Before we got here, the secretary of the school board prepared and signed these contracts and could even put the board president's electronic signature on it, which is not appropriate. The board did not approve salary schedules for tenured teachers who don't have contracts. Instead, the board approved their compensation through adoption of a budget. In this manner, the board approved compensation to relatives, which is not appropriate. Also, I know that was an issue that was brought to our attention through several calls that were made to our office. The secretary of the school board approves contract amendments that are not always mathematically correct, signed by the employee, reviewed, and signed by the superintendent. Obviously, when you're talking about compensation, everything has to be very precise. We found some significant issues in that area. I won't go through all of them, but you can read about them in the report. One example is the district paid $127,000 in stipends to 75 employees during the 2012 and 2013 school year, but there were not adequate policies and procedures for how to do that, how to handle that, and how to account for it. The district also had no basis for the superintendent's mileage allowance. There was no documentation for $1,500, which would basically be 3,700 miles per year in the district, and was not reporting those payments to the IRS as taxable income as is required. And that I think is going to change. We also had some issues with vehicles used by other members of the staff here not being properly reported or accounted for, and you can read about that also. The district did not report as additional compensation monies paid to a superintendent for driving a bus to athletic events, over $2,000 to several employees paid for working the gate at athletic events, and $620 paid to 3 teachers as additional compensation. Again, these are not huge amounts of money, but they do add up. And in each case, there was problems with the way the money was being handled. The stepladder program, we had some significant issues with. The district paid $51,000 in stepladder payments to 43 teachers during the year we audited. And this is for providing student assistance beyond traditional teaching activity. The problem was there were not adequate policies or procedures for the stepladder program. The committee prepared and used a summary plan to evaluate stepladder documentation, but there was no real detailed plans we would normally see in a school district. Criteria for compensation was inconsistent. So for example, the teacher handbook says that to reach the steps of additional compensation, you need 60, 90, or 120 hours for stage 1, 2, or 3 additional compensation, but the plan says it's 16, 32, or 60 hours. So there's a direct conflict there with how many hours are actually needed to earn the additional compensation. We also found that some stepladder log entries reported ineligible activities, including work already compensated for the stipend, hours worked before the school year began, and other such things like that. So there was some double payment under this program, and that was problematic. We found that the district overcompensated 8 participants, a total of $4,500, and also paid 5 employees who are not even in the program another $2,800 based upon incorrect information entered into the books. You know, you're talking about $7,000 or $8,000 there in inappropriate payments. Our recommendations always flow from our findings. You need to review the contracts and amendments for accuracy. Be sure they're signed by a superintendent or a board member. Reconsider the process for approving tenured teacher salaries. Specify stipend amounts and handle all those activities in accordance with good accounting principles. And the district is in the process of implementing those recommendations. Obviously, we want people to properly report and withhold taxes from all compensation. That's going to be implemented. I think the superintendent's vehicle allowance has been eliminated. And also establish a clear and consistent stepladder policy, because as I said, there was conflicting policies, and some people were paid who should not have been paid, and the district is implementing that one as well. If you turn now to finding number 3, which relates to payroll procedures, records, and policies, we found the district needs to improve those significantly. The district has not adequately segregated payroll duties. You have a bookkeeper who's primarily responsible for all payroll activity, does not review payroll checks issued, does not adequately document the review of direct deposits. A review of time and leave records prepared by the bookkeeper is pretty standard in the school district. It did not occur here until recently, and that would allow errors to go undetected. Some employees do not prepare timesheets, time cards, leave requests, and some do not sign their time records, and some supervisors do not approve time records. So it's pretty much loose all around in keeping track of time. The district has also allowed some employees to carry negative leave balances, meaning that they really shouldn't be getting the leave. We found 5 out of 13 employees we reviewed, we just did a sampling, had negative leave balances. We were concerned also, this was probably the one that concerned me the most as I studied the audit findings, was post-retirement employees. There's a law in Missouri, it's under section 169 of the Missouri Code that says a retired teacher or school employee may work up to 550 hours a year without discontinuing their retirement. So obviously no one wants to go over that 550 hours or they'll lose their retirement benefits. It looked to us like activities were engaged in to understate the amount of hours so they didn't go over the 550. You can read that in detail in our report. I don't want to be too harsh on anybody that may be around, but the bottom line was there were people who it appears to us worked more than 550 hours, and by the way that they calculated the hours and asked them to report it, sometimes they asked them only to report 2 hours in a day or 6 hours in a day, or they may have worked 8 hours. That was to keep them under the limit. That was one of the only examples we found where we were concerned there may have been some intentional misconduct. Obviously somebody taking care of a friend who had retired and not wanting them to lose their retirement benefits, but there's a state law on that. If you go over 550 hours, you lose your retirement. And in this case, there were many inaccuracies, and we believe some people did work over that limit and were still allowed to keep their retirement. Rather than tracking and recording actual hours, the district, for example, recorded 2 hours work for all bus drivers, regardless of how many hours they actually worked, and 6 hours for all teachers per day, regardless of how many hours they actually worked. So they were just told to put in a number. And in one case, there was a teacher who actually reported her actual hours, and they were told, no, don't use your actual hours, use the ones that we said. And that's not appropriate, and we found that to be very problematic. The district also does not maintain a list of related employees and board members, and has not established adequate policies and procedures related to hiring, supervising, or tracking for related employees. You know the word nepotism. When you hire or work with somebody who's related to you. There were some issues here. I won't go into all the details. You can read about it in the report. But there weren't adequate policies to ensure that that was not a problem for the district. So our recommendations on this flow again from our findings. Segregate payroll duties to ensure periodic independent review. The district has implemented that. Report actual time worked instead of telling people how many hours to put on a timesheet. The district has implemented that. And establish procedures to identify and monitor related employees. The district is in the process of working on those procedures as well. Bond refinancing, procurement procedures, and construction projects. It's a very common issue with school districts when we audit them. That's finding number 4. The district sold general obligation bonds through a negotiated instead of competitive sale. We did a study on this. You lose money when there's not competition. I mean, it's part of what our country's all about, the free market. And when you negotiate sales with bond underwriters, and we're not saying it happened here, but we've seen some bond underwriters who do tickets to football games and baseball games to people in order to prevent competition. And that's not right. We think all bond sales for school districts, which are insured by the state, should be done through a competitive process so you get a better price rather than a negotiated process. The district also did not always follow its own bidding policy with respect to projects. Board policy requires employees contact multiple vendors for purchases under $3,000, competitively bid purchases of $3,000 or more, and get sealed bids, which is the most rigorous form of competition for purchases over $15,000. We found problems with that. The district did not solicit bids in compliance with its policy or document sole source procurement for several purchases, including $20,000 worth of athletic supplies, $20,000 worth of bus radios, web hosting and email services worth over $17,000, and tablet computers worth in excess of $12,000. We also found the district had not established policies for the selection of some service providers and solicited proposals for several services without following proper procedures, including $10,000 for speech therapy, $10,000 for occupational therapy, $8,000 for physical therapy, $4,000 for athletic training, and others. The district has not competitively bid its audit services every 3 years as required by district policy, and has not solicited proposals from multiple banking institutions. So again, what we look for as auditors is competition. We look for everybody having a chance to bid, and we found in many cases that procedures were not followed, district procedures were not followed, and making sure there was adequate competition, because competition is what gets you the lowest price, and we're hopeful that that will improve going forward. Let's talk about construction management. That's where a lot of the big bucks are spent in school districts, is in construction. We found the district had not complied with board policy when procuring construction management services in 2012. Under your own policies and procedures, for projects expected to cost $500,000 or less, there has to be an evaluation of 3 highly qualified firms. Now, in this case, you only received 1 response, but it did not appear to us that adequate effort was made to find multiple bidders so that we could have true competition. We had some issues with monitoring of construction projects. The management company did not always prepare change orders for board approval. So, for example, there was one construction project to build a new weight and locker room for about $302,000. After evaluating all the bids, the cost was reduced to $282,000, but there was no documentation as to why. And then the cost ended up going up to $317,000, increasing the contract price by over $34,000, and there were no change orders approved or submitted. The construction management company also submitted payment applications with incorrect amounts listed, and no one identified the discrepancies, so there were some problems with the payment. The district also paid construction management a $7,500 bonus, but there was no documentation as to whether they earned the bonus or why they would get a bonus. So our recommendations, again, always flow from our findings. Consider competitive sales for future bond issuance. It will save you money. Solicit bids in compliance with board policy, and document if you have sole source procurements. In other words, if you don't compete out, you've got to explain why you're not using competition. And also solicit proposals for professional and banking services, and also enter into a written contract. We found in some cases services were procured and there was no written contract, which is required by state law. We also wanted the district to solicit construction management services in accordance with board policies, prepare change orders and submit them for approval, review payment applications for accuracy, and document bonus payments, all of which did not occur in the project we looked at and which the board has assured us will occur going forward. Disbursements is finding number 5 in our audit. The district needs to improve its disbursement procedures and policies. Same issues, segregation duties, they pretty much have one person doing all the disbursements. That's sort of a no-no under accounting procedures and practices. The list of bills approved by the board each month we found was incomplete, and the list of approved invoices was not actually compared to the checks that were written to make sure they were the same. We also looked into conflicts of interest. A number of people who contacted our office were concerned about conflicts of interest. The district did purchase over $10,000 worth of goods from a hardware store owned by the board president without soliciting bids. Now, the board president did properly abstain from approving these payments, but under Missouri law, you're required to file a personal financial disclosure if there's this type of conflict of interest, and that did not occur. So, under Section 105 of Missouri statutes, you cannot have financial transactions between the district and elected officials involving more than $5,000 per year unless there's been public notice to solicit such proposal and competitive bidding. And also, as I said, personal financial statements have to be filed with the state, which did not occur. The petty cash bank account was also problematic. The school board was not aware of a bank account used for petty cash by the school, and that paid, there were 61 disbursements during the year we looked at it that paid almost $20,000, and nobody was aware that the account existed. Obviously, that's problematic. We also had an issue with some of the checks being signed by only one person, which generally does not occur, and also 37 of those checks lack any supporting documentation for what they were for. The district does not have a formal purchase order policy, and administrative staff do not always complete purchase orders as required. And then we looked at the vendor list, a list of people and companies that supply goods and services to the district, and we found that the vendor list contained 39 duplicate names, listed one vendor 10 times, and did not include addresses for 159 vendors. So obviously that needs to be significantly improved. Employee reimbursements, local meal purchases, gifts, awards, those all occur in school districts. We expect them to occur, but there need to be formal written policies for employee reimbursements, for local meal purchases and gifts, and there were none in this district until recently. For example, this is just one example that was particularly egregious that we talked about. In the audit, one post-retirement employee employs a part-time information technology person, received $1,123 for something that was supposed to be professional development costs, but it included lodging, airfare, and a cruise to Cozumel in Mexico. That's not appropriate. This was the worst example, and I don't want you to think it happened every day. It's the kind of thing we don't like to see as auditors paying somebody for a Mexican trip. The district also reimbursed the track team coach $1,000 for fundraising expenses without obtaining proper supporting documentation. There was an issue that not-for-profit had indicated at one point it would match 6-to-1 some fundraising that had been done. We feel the district is entitled to $7,000, but no effort was made to acquire that money. Audit staff also identified frequent purchases of meals, food, and gift cards lacking supporting documentation, such as who received it and what the business purpose was. I mean, there are situations where you might want to give a gift card to somebody. We find that schools tend to overuse those, so we found thousands of them in the Kansas City School District. But if you're going to give out gift cards, basically it's giving cash to students or teachers or for people in the administration, you need to document exactly why they needed that card or what they did earn, and that did not occur. We also found the district did not monitor contracts effectively. They didn't, particularly with respect to meals. The district did not compare the number of meals served, the invoices it received from the meal vendor. In November 2012, for example, the district was billed for 874 adult meals, but it only showed that it served 562 meals. So we don't understand. That's a pretty big discrepancy. And we wanted reconciliation of that. There was 312 unsupported meals in just 1 month. That needs to change. The district entered into an agreement with a beverage vendor in June 2010, which required a rebate payment to the district, but the district was not even aware they were entitled to that rebate. So we pointed it out, and after we pointed it out, we all got an $8,000 rebate. So we brought a little money to the district. The district does not always enter written contracts. There's a state law that requires written contracts for vendors. And the district paid, for example, a local community college $46,000 provide technical classes to students, which might be a very good thing, but a written contract is required, and there wasn't one here. There were also situations where other entities rented or used your facilities, and there was no written contract with them as well. So our recommendation, again, is segregate duties, avoid a participation situation to create conflicts of interest, establish formal petty cash policies, establish formal policies and procedures for approval of purchase orders, and the good news was the district recognized the validity of what we found and has agreed to implement all of those recommendations. Also, update the vendor list, remove duplicate vendors. That's been done already. Establish written procedures for employee reimbursements, meal purchases, gifts, and awards. The district is in the process of implementing that right now. And properly monitor contract requirements, and of course enter into written agreements as is required by state law. The district says it intends to do that as well. Finding number 6, budget monitoring and accounting records and controls. We found that the district does need to improve its budget monitoring, accounting and record controls. For example, there was incomplete and inaccurate information in the accounting system. The school board basically reviews budget to actual reports quarterly. We think they should be monthly, and the report format does not really allow board members to review individual fund activities, what's going on in each specific area they look into. We also found that adjustments to the accounting system can be made by secretaries without independent approval, and you really can't allow administrative personnel to adjust the accounting of the district without somebody supervising that and approving it. We also found that electronic signatures are often attached by people who have no authority to do so. Our recommendations: monitor actual budget activity, have an independent approval of all adjustments, review electronic signatures, and make sure that you don't have a situation where people who are not authorized to make accounting adjustments make those adjustments. The district has implemented those changes. There is now proper authority and proper control over these monies. Wanted to talk a little bit about now finding number 7, which is attendance record reporting and computer controls. The district's attendance system doesn't accurately track some changes or limit the time frame during which changes can be made. There's no review by district officials to ensure changes made to attendance records are accurate. School secretaries can make changes to daily attendance records anytime during the day, and changes made by original users. So if somebody marks a student as present and says, oh no, I want to change them to be absent, they're not reported as a change, and it's sometimes hard or impossible to track those. We identified 2 of 11 documented absences not accurately reported in the attendance system. We found several other problems with absences and attendance records, which you can read about. But again, this is a really big issue. We have found across the state all kinds of inaccuracy in attendance. And of course, if you're not reporting attendance accurately, you're not reporting to the state how much money you're entitled to accurately, and it can really snowball into a big problem. So attendance needs to be very carefully monitored, and much more carefully monitored here. Access restrictions. We expect that when people have access to computers, that there's passwords, and that there's one password per person, and people not be allowed to access each other's computers. We found some significant problems. For example, there were some people like the bus driver who that had access to the attendance system, could actually make changes to the attendance system, and that's obviously not appropriate. You need to have only people who are involved in assessing attendance have access to that system. Passwords were not periodically changed, and some user identification passwords were shared, which is not appropriate. The district also has not established security controls to shut down computers after a certain period of inactivity. So I don't know about your computer, but if I leave mine on for a certain amount of time, after a minute or so, it turns off. That way somebody can't come in and look at what I'm doing. Until we got here, that was not occurring, but now it is. Our recommendations: improve controls, ensure attendance data is accurately reported, restrict time frame for making changes, and make sure there's an audit trail so you always know that if somebody changed an attendance record saying somebody who was absent was present or vice versa, you can figure out who did it and when they did it, so there's an audit trail. That way you can see if people are cheating on attendance or not. The district said they will improve that, and they will do that. They will also limit access rights to the attendance system to those who really need it, and that they will establish controls requiring the computer shut down after a certain period of time. We also want to talk a little bit about school board procedures and minutes. That's finding number 8 in our audit. The district did not conduct, for example, a cost-benefit analysis of some of the reorganizations. I know that was a very important issue to you all, about the way the grade schools were reorganized. We were concerned. The district twice reorganized its 2 elementary schools, but did not conduct a cost-benefit analysis, did not track actual costs and benefits to see if it was an economically positive thing to make the changes that they made. Now, there are other reasons for doing that, and the school pointed that out to us. You don't just do it for financial reasons, there's also educational and curriculum reasons, and we understand that. But we also want to see when we come into a school district that when there are reorganizations made, that someone assess the cost impact on the district and whether it would free up or whether it would hinder additional monies going to the students. So as you know, for example, in 2013-14, the student district moved all grades 3 and 4 to the Ash Grove Elementary School, and we were concerned about whether or not they had really analyzed what the cost impact of that would be on the district. We also found the school board did not always comply with the Sunshine Law. Some closed meeting minutes did not document the matters discussed. Open meeting minutes did not always record a roll call vote to go into closed session. Meetings did not always document decisions made by the board, and sometimes the minutes were not accurate, as opposed to what they wrote down is not what actually happened at the meeting. We also found district policies are not accurate or updated, or adequately communicate to the employees. You can have the best policies in the world unless there's a way to communicate those to the employees, educate the employees on what those policies are. They won't be following them because they don't know about them. Finding number 9, capital assets and fuel usage. We found the district needs to improve procedures and controls over district property and fuel usage. For example, capital assets is basically inventory. The district does not maintain a detailed record of the property owned by the district. It does not perform inventories of capital assets held outside of classrooms. The capital asset listings do not include many items. We looked at some. We found 12 valued about $56,000 that were not included on any inventory list. You know, these days, keeping track of inventory is more important than it ever has been. Inventory used to be stuff like this podium. Now inventory can include things like laptops and video equipment and things that are very easily stolen. So it's very important to keep very accurate records of your inventory. Our recommendation, of course, is improve your inventory and capital asset records and perform periodic reconciliations, and if something's missing, try to figure out where it went. That's a summary of what we found. It's a lot of problems, but it's a lot of small and medium-sized problems, not huge ones. When I come to a place like this and I deliver, you know, some news that isn't so great, like we found here today, I want it to be very clear that our purpose is only one purpose, and that is to make sure that the problems we found are addressed and that you're able to have your money properly spent and that money going to educate kids goes to that education. We're not interested in settling any scores or political battles going on between school board members and the like. All we do is take a very objective, cold look at how the accounting procedures, processes, and controls are going, and then we make recommendations. When we give out a fair grade like this one, and when we have multiple findings like we had here, we come back in 98 days, maybe sometimes a little longer, depending on how they're progressing, to make sure that everything we recommend has been implemented. We will be back in a few months to make sure that everything we recommended be done has in fact been implemented, so that you can be sure that your school district is well run, with very, very precise and accurate accounting controls and procedures, proper policies, no conflicts of interest. It's always an honor to serve you as your state auditor. I find the most energizing part of my job is being able to come in and talk to a group of citizens about what we found, how things are going to be improved. You have a really neat place. I passed up the round barn on the way here. I really enjoy it. I driving through the city. I always spend time in the city before I deliver an audit look around. You should be very proud of your city. I know you've gotten some very successful athletic teams. There's a lot of good things here, and I always feel uncomfortable when I give a relatively negative audit. That people don't think that they live in a bad community or a poorly run community. This was a community that needed an audit, and I appreciate your taking the time to get the signatures, to get me in here to do the audit. You see a lot of findings. It's a very long audit, but these are all things that can be fixed. You know, sometimes we go some places and it's almost hopeless. I've done audits of certain schools where, I mean, I don't know how they're going to fix the problems. They're in such terrible financial condition, or there's some really bad shenanigans going on with unethical people. We didn't find that here. What we found was a school district that just needs to kind of tighten up its accounting procedures and controls across the board, pretty much. But if you do that, that will be fixed. You go back to everything you've been doing. You can be confident that you have a very well-run school district. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks.